Okay, is a presentation visible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
So we ended yesterday on this slide. Yes, we said that we are using composite materials as a combination of different materials, and we usually have one of two objectives. Either we are taking two materials and the good properties either are combined or averaged, and the bad properties they cancel each other out, or sometimes you want to create new properties like making two brittle materials, we can make a ductile composite, or taking two isotropic materials, we can make a orthotropic material, etc., etc. So let us now briefly continue our discussion about what are the things that metals cannot do and what are the limitations of metal. That's why we have to go for composite material. So the first concept that we need to keep in mind is that the lightness of a material will depend on the mass of atoms present. For example, CH2, which is the building block of almost all polymers, has an atomic weight of 14, its density is 0.95. And as we increase the atomic weight from aluminum to titanium to iron, the density is also increasing. Okay. Metals, so lightness of a material depends on mass. It also depends on the atoms per unit volume, which in turns will depend on two things. It depends on the type of bond. If you have a primary bond, the amount of atoms per unit wall is higher because the average distance between two atoms is lower. If there are more secondary bonds, you can expect the material to be lighter. Also, if it is crystalline, then the packing is optimized. So you can expect the density to be higher. If it is amorphous, then there is lot of free volume. You can expect the material to be lighter. So these are some of the things which inherently make a material light or heavy. Okay. Now we find that metals are rather heavy. Why are metals heavy? Because of two reasons. First, you only have primary bonds. There is no secondary bonds. And it is usually of the order of 95% crystalline. So it's very little amorphous. So if you see, this is a image of some metal where everywhere there is uniform packing of atoms. Only at the grains you have some disorder. Only the grain boundaries have some disorders, but otherwise it is very nicely packed. And there is narrow area of disorder. Because of this, your metals are inherently heavy. Polymers are lighter than metals because it has two types of bonds. Sorry for the typo, this should be O. So there are two types of bonds. One is primary, which is along the chain, and there is secondary bonds, which is in between the chains. So as you increase the secondary bonds, it becomes lighter and lighter. And you have, it could be semi-crystalline, 30 to 60% crystallinity, as opposed to 95% for metals, or it can be fully amorphous also. So because of that, if you look at CH2, its density is very low. So, but metals are stiffer than polymers. Polymers are lighter, but metals are stiffer. So this quantity is usually the most important quantity for us while choosing materials based on the stiffness. What is the Young's modulus divided by density? This is known as specific density. Okay. So carbon fibers specific modulus is 285. We will try to understand why this is so high. CH2, which is the building block of all polymers, so basically it is CH2N. Its E by rho is very low. One very interesting thing is almost all metals have specific density close to each other. All of them will be in the range of 25 to 27, more or less. Can anybody tell me why? Why is the specific density of all metals very similar to each other? Anybody? Why do you think the specific density of metals is very similar? Almost all metals are in this range. Based on the two slides that I have said, I think you should be able to apply and then you should be able to say.
Almost all of them have crystalline in nature and have primary bonds.
Yes, exactly. So all of them have crystalline structure, 95, 98% of crystallinity, all of them are primary. So the modulus increases as the atom size increases, but so does the density, and then you have very, very similar numbers. Which is a problem, yes, for us material scientists, if you look from the point of view, of material scientists, the fact that we cannot play around with this very important number is not nice. Let us see if polymers allow us to play with this number. Can we increase or decrease this number depending on if it is not a metal? Before that, but for metals, strength is a different story. You cannot play around with the specific stiffness that is fixed. It will more or less be in the range of 24 to 27. But strength you can play around. Strength is not determined by your bonds, but it is determined by the mobility of dislocations. And this is well understood. So there are many mechanisms available to increase the yield stress without changing the stiffness. Stiffness we cannot change, but yield stress strength we can change. This is known for quite a bit now. Actually, high strength steel is very commonly available. Polymers also we can increase the strength. Strength of a polymer is determined by the relative mobility of polymer chains. Okay, if we add more secondary bonds and reduce the amount of primary bonds, then we are normally expecting to increase or change the stiffness and strength. And polymers also have strong temperature dependence. As you increase the temperature, the modulus might decrease, which metals at room temperature, they don't show any temperature dependence. Okay. But all said and done, metals are superior to polymers even for lightweight structures. Once again, we are looking at these numbers. These numbers are much, much greater than this number. And this number 52, the specific strength of a polymer, is 1/4 lower than that of any metal. And in general, we can also say that if I am only interested in lightweight structure, plastics can never replace metals. Even if your criteria is specific stiffness or your criteria is specific strength, it cannot do that. But what about fibers? Now in fibers, we can dramatically change the specific stiffness and strength of the fiber. Okay. This can be done by orienting the polymer chains. So if these are two thermoplastics, the one on the left can have a much higher stiffness and strength in one direction, let us say, and lower stiffness and strength in the two direction. So we can orient the polymer chains. This does not cause a change in density, but will cause a dramatic change in the stiffness and strength of the fiber. So all of you, does anybody recall what is the property catenation? Most of you learnt it in your +2. I will give you a hint. Carbon has this very special property of catenation.
The property of
Its ability to
Yes, one at a
several
time.
atoms joining with each other.
Yeah, to make very long chains. So the carbon has a property that it can join each other and make very long chains. Now, it turns out that that is excellent for making fibers. If we can make a process where we have long chains of carbon and all of them are aligned in the same direction, the stiffness of carbon fiber in that direction will become very, very high. So now in our table, we have introduced carbon fiber. So depending on the catenation, you can have intermediate modulus, high modulus, ultra high modulus carbon fiber. The difference between all of this is how much of the catenation property were we able to exploit? Meaning how many carbon fibers were aligned in the same direction. No bonds in the transverse direction, all the carbon fiber bonds parallel to each other. So if you see now, if you look at these numbers, it is 5 to 15 times more than metal. If you recall, specific density of metals was in the range 25 to 27. But because carbon has this very nice property of catenation and we know how to exploit it, so our friends in the chemical engineering department, they research on these topics, and around the world we figured out how to make carbon fibers with all the carbon-carbon bonds in the same direction. And you can get very high specific modulus and much higher than metal. So this is one way of looking at different materials. So this is what is known as an Ashby chart. Ashby was a professor in Cambridge, and he was the first one to have this graphical illustration of comparing materials. So on the x-axis, you have specific strength, meaning this is, so if the different materials here have poor strength and here you have good strength. Similarly, on the y-axis, you have stiffness, good stiffness to weight, bad stiffness to weight. So plastics are here, very low strength, very low stiffness. So it was 0.92. We found out that most metals are, the stiffness is in the range 25 to 27. So they are here. The strength can vary, but they are here. Glass fiber is, stiffness to weight is the same range as metals, but the strength is higher. Carbon fiber is a complete outlier. It is, no material comes close to it even. And if you mix polymer and carbon fiber, you get carbon fiber composite, which is still superior to all the metals. As such, we are looking for materials in this range. This is the most interesting place for us. High strength to weight, high stiffness to weight. This is interesting to us. So as we travel along the diagonal, the better it is. We want to travel along this diagonal and go up higher and higher. So now we have carbon fiber, which is a complete outlier, and we also understand why this is happening. But we have a problem. I mean, we cannot really compare fiber with a metal, because with fiber alone, you cannot build an aeroplane or any structure. So you have to somehow glue the strong and stiff fibers. This is where your polymers are coming. They are weak, but they are light, and they do a good job of gluing together all the fibers. And this way we are building a composite material which will be still better than most classic construction materials. I mean, look at this. Carbon fiber composite is still better. I mean, if I make a diagonal line, it is still higher up on the diagonal line as compared to steel, aluminum, glass fiber, plastics. And this has been done. Strong, stiff fibers have great stiffness and strength, but we have to somehow glue them together. That gluing is done by polymers, and then we have a composite material. Now, you have to, but I mean, this is all from a mechanics point of view, from a design point of view, but you also have to keep in mind the material and manufacturing cost. This is a very important parameter. So we have to, basically now we need to, the whole point of this course is how to build composite materials so that we can optimize the effect of stiff fibers. We will add stiff fibers, we will add plastics which are light, but we want to optimize the effect of fiber. We want, as we say, maximum bang for our buck, so that we can get high performance at minimum weight. Okay, so basically we want a composite material which will have high specific stiffness and strength. It can be tailored design. I can have stiffness in a certain direction. I can have better fatigue properties, dimensional stability, corrosion conductivity, but at a reduced cost. Only doing this and making the cost very, very high will not help us. We want these 5 or more attributes at reduced cost. Okay, so now coming to our course, these are the 3 textbooks we will be using. And the one on the top is the one which I am going to refer to the most. The other two are also nice, but yeah, we'll look at all three, but more for the book by Karl T. Herakovich. And there are other resources also, which I will share from time to time. Okay. Our lectures are Monday 12 to 1, Tuesday 10 to 12, Thursday 8 to 9. It will be on and off, meaning sometimes we will have it, sometimes we will not have it. I will let you know in advance. So if there is some reading material or if there is some term project which I think will take more of your time, then we'll not have the class. So Thursday 8 to 9 typically is a tutorial. And this course is such that there is not much scope of having at least a weekly tutorial will not be needed. So this will be on and off. We'll definitely have 3 hours a week. The fourth hour, either you have some video to watch, or you have some term project to work on, or you have some presentation to study yourself. Okay. So this brings me to the end of the introduction. Any questions so far? First of all, any technical questions, and then we can talk about any questions about how the course will run. Hopefully with this presentation, now everybody is clear as to why we are using composite materials, the rationale, why fibers are stiff. Yes. Anybody, anything you want to add, ask?
Sir, can you describe about the grading mechanism of this course?
Yes. So basically we are going to, so ultimately it will depend a little bit on, okay, Saksham, I will come to your question. So ultimately the exact grading mechanism will depend on the number of students. Currently in ERP, I can see 34, but the faculty advisors are telling me that I should expect about 60 to 70. So ultimately it will depend on how many students are there. But what we are looking for broadly is that there will be a term project which will run parallelly to the course. So whatever, not whatever, but most of the things that we learn during the course, that has to be implemented in a programming language of your choice. And the different design calculations that we learn in this course, your code should be able to execute. So there will be one term project and it will have a major components. About 30 to 40% of the weightage is going to be on the term project, and that term project will have to be done individually. And you have to be very careful that you write your code or you develop your own piece of software by yourself. I mean, plagiarism, we'll be very strict against plagiarism, like copying code from each other, that will not be tolerated. But at the same time, programming language is your choice. You can do whatever you like, any language that you like. Basically, as we learned in the class, at the end of the week, I will indicate that yes, this formula or this concept has to be implemented, and there will be 4 or 5 such pieces that have to be added up, and then you get some sort of tool based on which you can do design of composite materials. That is your term project, and 30 to 40% weightage. Then we are looking at 3 exams, roughly first week of every month, February, March, April, we have 3 exams of about 1 hour each, which will be using a combination of Moodle as well as workouts. Workouts means that you will write the question, you will solve the solution in a piece of paper and upload it either in Dropbox or in MS Teams. I will tell you later. And both your Moodle and what you have written in the piece of paper will be evaluated. Yes, that's it. That is how it is going to be graded.
Answer assignments.
Term project is your assignment. I mean, you will make a term, you will have to program, you'll have to write a report. That will take substantial effort. No assignments additionally will be there. Yes, is it clear how this course will be run?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I am seeing in the message, Saksham is asking, can you please elaborate about the physical significance of specific density? No, it is specific stiffness and specific strength. So specific stiffness means how much density are you getting per unit weight. And specific strength is how much strength you are getting per unit weight. So higher the specific density, the better your material is. For example, if your specific density is 100, it means that the stiffness of the material is 100 gigapascal and your density is only 1. On the other hand, if you have a material whose specific density is 10, it could mean that the stiffness is 100 gigapascal, but it is 10 times heavier. So both of them will do the same work, but material B will be 10 times heavier. Similarly for strength. Is it clear? Okay, good. Okay, good. So any other questions on this introduction to composite materials? So if not, then I can go to the second topic which we want to discuss. So basically, as I said, there are going to be 3 exams, and so the course has been divided into 3 parts. And in each part, there is going to be a solid numerical or theoretical aspect and one small descriptive aspect about composite materials. So, for example, in the first 1/3 of the course, we will study about micromechanics of composite materials and manufacturing of composite materials. The second 1/3 is about classical lamination theory and testing of composites, so on and so forth. So every month, basically, we have one topic where it is more descriptive, and the rest is theory with derivations and numericals, etc. So today we will start with manufacturing of composite materials, as to how composites are manufactured. Now, this is a course on mechanics of composites. There is a separate elective on manufacturing of composites in the autumn semester. So the objective is not to go into great detail about how composites are manufactured, but for the uninitiated, to give you a rough idea, to give you a basic idea as to how composites are made, what are the different challenges, the assumptions that we make during manufacturing, that we make during modeling. Are those assumptions good assumptions, or so on and so forth. So let us start with our manufacturing of composites. So is my slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is a very high level discussion on composites manufacturing. All the images are either taken from the internet or from the book Comprehensive Composite Materials. Through our library, you will have access to this book if you want to know more about composite materials, how composite materials are manufactured. Okay. So why are we studying manufacturing of composite materials? As I said, this is a course on mechanics of composites, but we start with manufacturing of composites because of we want to know about the different methods as to how composites can be fabricated. We would like to know the strength and weaknesses of different methods. But the fourth bullet point is the most important point as to why we are going through this lecture today. We would like to have better perspectives about different assumptions made in the models developed later in the course. So any model that we build about calculating the effective stiffness, strength, etc., will have some inherent assumptions. Are those assumptions really valid? That is something that we are going to develop perspectives about. And finally, we would like to know different considerations while choosing manufacturing method. For example, there might be a certain type of composite material which has the highest specific stiffness, highest specific strength. But that does not mean we will use that composite material for all applications. There are many considerations. We will go through them one by one. Okay. So these are some of the different methods of manufacturing that we are going to very briefly discuss. Every method we just spend 2 to 5 minutes, just that so you know. So the most basic way of making a composite material is by what is known as the hand layup. You will start with fabric layers which are laid by hand. So this, you can see this black na. So this is a person working in a workshop. Yeah, so this is a person working in a workshop. He is carefully cutting fiber layers and laying it down. Okay, so this black that you see is all fibers. Once this is done, he is going to pour matrix, and using a roller like this, he is going to press it so that the matrix percolates the different layers of the fiber. This is how you make composites by hand. And after you have done it, of course, you will subject it to heat and pressure, and then you have a composite material. So the good thing about this is that this minimum tooling cost is needed. All you need is some mold tool and a consolidation roller. If you have these two and you have some means of heating, applying heat and pressure to your composite materials, you can make composites. So this is actually by far the most expensive, by far the most labor expensive way of making composite materials. And this is used either in the labs or it is used in very niche industries where they want to be absolutely sure that your composites are very high quality. So you can achieve very high quality by this method. People who are good at this, they can actually make composite by hand layup, which is very, very good quality. By good quality, we mean that the voids present inside your composite are very, very low. So lower the voids, higher the quality. And it is said that there are certain automobile sectors who make very high-tech cars, like Lamborghini car is made by large number of parts inside the Lamborghini car is actually made by hand layup. Okay, but I mean the problem is it is very labor expensive. You cannot build a large number of parts by this approach. So step by step, this is what is done. You have a mold. You will apply some coating so that your fiber and the matrix does not stick to the mold. You have and then you have the fiber and the matrix, and then you roll it. You apply roller so that the matrix is going deep inside your fiber. And then you apply heat and pressure. After that, your part is ready. You just have to do some surface finishing. This is very low cost, but it is time consuming. And it is labor intensive. You need lots of labors to be able to do this. So now this cannot be used by all industries. You cannot really scale up hand molding sufficiently. So what people do is they use what is known as spray layup. Spray layup is an attempt to mechanize the hand layup process. In that, you have a sort of a gun, which is like a spray gun, and you have two nozzles in that gun. The first nozzle is giving the air pressurized resin. The second is the fiber. And you have a chopping mechanism, which is here. So you can then just hold it like a gun and spray broken fiber and the matrix wherever you want. So this way you can automate your hand layup process. A big disadvantage obviously is that in the hand layup you have continuous long fibers is possible. In this mechanism you are actually chopping fibers. So your fibers will be shorter and they will be randomly oriented. So this method, you can make a large number of composites very quickly, but the properties are not going to be good. You will learn later in the course that as you decrease the fiber length, both the stiffness and strength will decrease. And as the fibers get more randomly oriented, the stiffness and the strength also decreases. So the advantage of spray layup over hand layup is that it is mechanized, so you can automate it. It is less labor expensive, but shorter fiber length, random orientation, poorer properties. Okay. And in both of the methods, you have to apply heat and pressure. So how do you apply a pressure? You apply a pressure by what is known as a vacuum bag. In a vacuum bag, you have, so this is your composite material. At the bottom, you have the composite materials and you put different layers. You put sort of a sticker over it, and the two stickers are connected to a vacuum pump. So based on this, you can apply large amount of pressure. But this is very, it looks simple, but the chemistry and the manufacturing engineering behind this is very complex. For example, in a simple vacuum bagging, there is a large number of different consumables that are needed. You don't need to know and you don't need to learn all the different consumables that are needed while creating vacuum over a laminate, but this is to give you some perspective that there is significant chemical engineering, there is significant manufacturing that goes into making a composite. It is just not enough that you are good at mechanics of composites and you know all about composites. The chemistry and the manufacturing is quite intense. Even for a simple thing such as vacuum bagging, you need a very large number of consumables and each of them has a different role. So each of them has to have a different formulation. It is very complex. Okay, so that is how you apply pressure. And then you have to apply heat. To apply heat, you will use what is known as a autoclave. Autoclave is sort of an oven inside which you can put your composite part, your vacuum bagged composite part, and then you can regulate the temperature. And bigger your part, the bigger your autoclave will have to be. For example, this is the autoclave used by Boeing 777 to build a part of the fuselage. So for perspective, this is one person who is standing here. This is a sort of a minivan, which is, you can say, about 15 to 20 feet. So this gives you perspective as to how big the autoclave is. And not only do you need such a big autoclave, but you also need enough power to heat up the entire autoclave for the temperature that is needed. And it is no exaggeration to say that the autoclave used by some of the autoclaves used by Airbus and Boeing are bigger than the building that we have for our mechanical engineering department. It has to be that big. So now imagine heating up such a big space for prolonged periods for temperatures which are in the hundreds of degrees Celsius, how energy expensive it might be. Okay, so inside an autoclave, you have the composite laminate, which is subjected to vacuum bag. This is subjected to vacuum, and you have heating cooling system so that you are regulating the temperature inside your autoclave. So this is the process. You will lay up the different lamina layers. It could be manual, it could be automated. You will apply the pressure to balance pressure between the environment and autoclave, and then you subject it to heat and pressure in some specific order. And what is that specific order? Before we go to the specific order, can anybody tell me what is the difference between thermoset and thermoplastic? Yes, anybody?
Sir, in Shivanshu here, sir. In thermoset, sir, once the material has been made, it cannot be reheated and remolded. While in thermoplastic, we can reheat and remold it, I think.
Why? Yeah, you are right. Shivanshu, you are right, but why is this?
Sir, cross-linking is there in thermosetting, sir, and in thermoplastic, cross-linking is not there.
Not there, right? You are right. That is correct. So basically, thermosets, when you heat it up to a certain temperature, the monomers, they are going to cross-link with each other. And those cross-links, they cannot break if you reheat it again. So this is a irreversible one-way process. But thermoplastics, if you heat above a certain temperature, the polymers can still break into monomers. So a thermoplastic, you can heat, make it into a shape, and you can repeat that. Thermosets, you cannot retain that. Okay. And most of the aerospace industry so far has been using thermosets as opposed to thermoplastics. And there are various reasons. Thermosets are tougher, they are better stiffness, they are better higher at higher temperatures, they give you better service, etc., etc. But on the other hand, thermoplastics are gaining more and more momentum in application because of their recyclability. If you make a composite part out of thermoplastic, and let's say it has finished its end of life, you made a part to be used in an aeroplane for 10 years. 10 years later, you can heat that and you can either reclaim the fiber or you can make the composite into a different shape. Thermosets don't allow you that. So as we are getting more and more conscious about environment, about recycling, thermoplastics are getting more and more in vogue. But as of today, thermosets are more commonly used. Okay, so in the message, I am seeing some questions. Kasi Viseswaria is saying, yes, the slides will be uploaded in MS Teams, you will have it. Shivanshu is asking, we said that we cannot make the aircraft solely using carbon fibers. That is why we use polymers. Is that because of cost? No. Carbon fibers, so you know, the fiber can take load only in tension. No fiber or cable can take load in compression. So if you have a fiber, if you pull it, apply tensile load, it can take a lot of load. But as soon as you apply slightly compressive or off-axis load, it is going to collapse. So we have to somehow stick all the fibers together, and all the fibers, they can, as at best you can make a net. It is not going to make a continuous waterproof, so as to speak, component only by fibers. Somehow the fibers have to be glued. That is the role of the plastic. It is not because of the cost. Is this clear? Shivanshu?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Good. So now let us go back to our presentation. Yeah, so inside a autoclave, so you have laid up your composite and you have applied pressure. The pressure is, so in this plot, basically x-axis is time. This dotted line shows you how the pressure is varying, and the solid line tells you inside an autoclave how the temperature has to be changed. So very quickly you will ramp up your pressure to of about 5 to 6 kilopascal. No, 5 to 600 kilopascal. Temperature, what happens? Initially, gradually you have to increase it up to a certain temperature. This is the temperature at which your thermoset will start melting, and you will hold it at that temperature. Pressure is increased rapidly, temperature is at a ramp, and at this temperature, the viscosity of the matrix is high enough so that it can flow inside all the fiber bundles, and it can completely surround all the dry fibers. You have to hold it for some time and then again increase the temperature, and at a higher temperature, the curing of the matrix will take place. Curing of the matrix means cross-linking of the monomers that we were talking about a few minutes ago. And it takes some amount for the complete curing of the thermoset to take place. And after that, you have to slowly cool it down. So making a typical composite part with epoxy and carbon fiber takes about 4 hours. And for that 4 hours, you are looking at temperatures of about 200 degrees Celsius to be maintained. Now, can anybody tell me, pressure we are increasing very rapidly, but temperature we are increasing at a ramp. What will happen if I suddenly increase the temperature or I suddenly decrease the temperature?
Thermal stresses will increase.
There will be incredible thermal stresses, and your plate, you want it to be a flat plate, but you will get a curved warp plate. So you have to be very careful about these things. The exact temperature, the exact amount of time, all this is depending on the chemistry of the thermoset. What is the viscosity? What are the different parameters of the matrix? So if you buy some epoxy in the market, you will also get what is known as, you will also be provided with the detail of the cure kinetics. And meaning, basically this chart will be provided to you, that if you have bought if you want to make a composite with this type of epoxy or with this thermoset, this detail is usually provided by the manufacturer. And you have to use your autoclave and program it so that this order is respected. For thermoplastic, this is not needed. Thermoplastic, you will just increase the temperature, keep it for a small time, and then decrease the temperature. So the amount of time for a thermoplastic will be significantly lower, because this large amount of time for curing of the matrix does not have to take place for thermoplastics. Okay, so what is the challenge? So automobile, aerospace sector is almost using autoclave. You can see 90-95% of the parts inside an aeroplane are made using autoclaves. What are the challenges? The biggest opportunity is that it leads to the highest quality of composites. By putting a vacuum bag, you are you are making sure that the voids will be very low. But the challenge is that it is hard to control the reactions. What exactly is happening inside an autoclave, you don't know. It's like a black box. You are putting something and hoping that a composite of high quality will come out. And if you have some sort of core, some sort of soft core inside the composite, so if you have a structure which has soft core inside and composite outside, so making shapes like that is difficult. And you need high pressure to control the voids. If the pressure is low, then the matrix will not completely be able to surround the dry fiber, leading into high voids. But as you increase the pressure, the voids, they tend to come down, but we are looking at pressures of 500 to 600 kilopascal. Aerospace standard is that the void should be less than 0.25%. If the void is more than 0.25%, the aerospace industry is going to reject that part. To achieve that, you need very, very high pressure. So this is a very big problem with autoclaves. And there will be some volatiles which will remain intact inside the composite. And more the volatiles, the less likely that your composite is going to perform in a rough environment. Rough means high temperature, humidity, etc. So we have to design a manufacturing method which does not take so much energy or time, but the void content should be low and the volatile content we should be able to remove, which autoclave is unable to remove. Volatile content means something like, let us say, water vapor got trapped inside your fiber for some reason. So under high temperature and pressure, it became water vapor, and now normally that should come out of the system. It should not be a part of the composite laminate that you have created. But sometimes it gets trapped. So some content like that, it is unable to remove completely. And the biggest disadvantage is the large amount of energy that is needed to start and maintain high temperature inside autoclave for 4 hours, 5 hours. And you've seen how big an autoclave really is. So one of the methods that people have been exploring are what is known as electron beam curing. So this is like a microwave oven. So, when you heat food in a microwave, only your food gets heated. The rest of the environment does not get heated. So this is a possibility where you have some sort of a microwave-like system. You only heat up the composite laminate, meaning the fiber and the thermoset. You don't need to heat up the entire autoclave. Okay, so as I said, aerospace industry almost exclusively uses this method for composite fabrication. Long hold time, expensive equipment, they make it unviable for the automotive industry. And more, the future for composite manufacturing is out of autoclave. We don't want to fabricate a composite inside an autoclave. We are always looking for methods how we can make a composite outside of an autoclave. Okay, so this is the first family of method of manufacturing composites. Any questions so far? Can I move forward? So Akhil has asking, sir, what is a vacuum bag and how is it applying pressure? I'm unable to understand this. Okay, good. So let us go back to our slides. So let us now take a reverse. So in this slide, I have shown that we have to apply high pressure to completely extract all the air bubbles that might be trapped inside my fiber and matrix. Okay. So how do I apply that high pressure? I will make a laminate, and on top of the laminate, I will put a layer of plastic or something which is very strong but can be removed later. And that plastic is connected to a vacuum pump. So all of you know what a vacuum cleaner is. All of you have used or seen at your homes. What does that do? That sucks away the dirt. Yes. Similarly, in this setup, you have a vacuum pump. Its main task is to suck away all the air that might be trapped inside. So again, recall, when you are putting fibers and when you are putting resin like this, there might be some air inside, right? It is not necessary that the resin will be able to completely trap all the fibers. There might be some air bubbles which are trapped because the viscosity of the resin usually is not so high. In fact, try to imagine a bottle of honey. If you see a bottle of honey, you will notice that there are air bubbles trapped. Yes or no? Let me show you something. Honey bottle. Is this visible, a picture of a honey bottle?
Yes, sir.
Can you see these air bubbles that are there? Dot, dot, all these dots that you see are air bubbles. Yes or no? All these dots. Yeah, it's everywhere. These are air bubbles. This is happening because honey has high viscosity. It does not spread around like water. And when you have liquids like this, then invariably there will be bubbles which are trapped. Now, most thermosets that you are going to use are going to be viscous like this at room temperature when you are doing the hand layup or the machine layup. Because of that, inside this green, you are going to have tiny amounts of air bubbles which are trapped. Now, inside a good composite part, those air bubbles should not be there. As I said, the air bubbles maximum that we want is 0.25% for it to be used in the aerospace industry. If the void is more than 0.25%, it will not fly. It will not be part of any flying equipment. So how to remove those air bubbles? So we will lay it up. After laying it up, I will use a vacuum pump, which is very similar to the vacuum cleaner that we have in our houses, to suck out all the air. And then we laminate all the air bubbles which are trapped. Hopefully we can remove as much as possible. This is put inside my autoclave. So inside the autoclave, you have something like this. This is your vacuum bag, which is connected to a vacuum pump, which is leading to high amount of pressure inside your composite laminate so that all the voids go away. This is your vacuum. And your vacuum bag is basically your composite laminate is inside a bag, which is known as a vacuum bag. And that bag has a hole. That hole is connected to a vacuum pump. And our objective is all the air bubbles that have been trapped inside my laminate that must come out. That is the job of the vacuum bag and the vacuum pump. Clear? Akhil?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Anything else? Can I move forward? Okay, so let's go to our next. So the next family of process, which are known as the resin infusion process. Resin infusion process, there are family of methods. For example, resin transfer molding, vacuum assisted resin transfer molding, etc., etc. Almost all of them work on the same principle. Let us see what the basic principle is. The basic principle is you will have a mold, which is the upper mold and the lower mold. In between the two molds, you will put your fabric and the resin. Resin is the matrix, is infused into this mold. Okay, so basically upper mold, lower mold, this is the fiber, and you are injecting, so almost you are injecting the resin till it fills up the complete mold. Apply heat and pressure, your part is ready. So the advantage of making composites like this is you don't need an autoclave for this. It is possible to make different shapes. Hand layup is almost like flat shape only. Finishing will be quite good, and it is possible to automate. Okay. To further make our process of RTM better is that you have the same thing. You have molds, you have the carbon fiber or any fiber for that matter. Resin is injected into your mold, but at the same time, you also have a vacuum pump so that the pressure is made. So this is pushing the resin, this vacuum pump is pulling the resin. So it is going to fill up the mold very quickly, and you can make a nice part out of your composite even at perhaps a lower amount of time. Okay, so you will use RTM. The key driver for these processes is low investment. And the design possibilities is that it is possible to integrate metal inserts, different resin content in different locations, etc., etc. All of this autoclave does not allow. But again, cycle time is still long. It is comparable to a autoclave, and scaling up production is hard. Since cycle time is long, if you want to build tens of thousands of parts, you will need large amount of such machines. So to avoid all of this, people have started what is known as compression molding. In compression molding, basically you have a carrier film. A carrier film is a sort of the resin is in the form of a thermoplastic. And on top of that, you are putting continuous fiber strands and applying pressure. So you are compacting it. It is almost like, you have seen this when you, let's say you go to a railway station and you want to eat something, you get it in a plate which is made out of leaves. So how are those plates made? You collect the leaf and you compress it under high temperature and pressure. So you stamp it for some time and that plate is made, correct? This process is very similar. This is neat resin. On top of that, you are putting fiber and then you apply pressure and then you try to stamp it and then your parts are made. So this is mostly for thermoplastics only. And these machines can be very big. So just to give you an idea, this is at a height 3 feet for the operator to use. This is how big such machines can be. The entire floor of a car can be made by one shot using machines like this. So first of all, the resin is flowing. On top of that, you put fiber, pressure is applied, press is opened. And if the pressure is low, you will get blisters, uneven resin distribution. If it is very high pressure, you are going to get warpage and you are going to get bad quality composites. So closing of the mold and using proper equipment is very important. This is very popular for automotive applications and never used by the aerospace industry. This is because you are going to get high variability in properties. As the fiber is flowing, you can have different fiber orientation in different places. And because you have different fiber orientation in different places, the properties might vary from point to point. And for a performance critical sector like the aerospace, point by point variation of the properties is not nice. But for a cost sensitive sector like the automotive sector, this is okay. They are happy with this compromise. So, and there are ways of simulation, and simulation means you have to simulate the mold filling, the curing. Based on the curing, what is the fiber orientation? Based on the fiber orientation, what are the properties? We'll go through all of these different steps during our course, but they exist. You have to take care. Key driver is cost and weight reduction. It is 60% cheaper and 25% lighter than steel if you make composites by this route. Design consideration is that you can make curvatures, you can make uneven thicknesses. There are you have some freedom with the shape. And limitation is that you cannot control the fiber orientation. So you cannot control the local stiffness. Whatever you get, you have to be happy with that. So you see, every manufacturing process has some key driver as to why people are using it. There is some reason. It gives you some design features are allowed and some design features are not allowed. So based on your need, which key driver is the closest to your need, you have to choose that. But you have to be aware of what you can design and what you cannot design. Okay, another approach to making composites is to have a hollow part like this, and this part is rotating. And as it rotates, it is surrounded by fiber and the matrix to get the final part. So it looks something like this. So this brown is the hollow part. This is rotated by robotic arms, and there is another member which is supplying fibers to it. So by correctly programming the rotation of this mandrel, you can make sure that there is enough and there is uniform distribution of fiber everywhere. This is highly automated. You can make complex shapes, and you can have composite materials which has high hoop strength. So if you want to make a pressure vessel inside a ship, or if you want to make a container to keep fuel, this is a very good way of making composites for that. This is used highly by the shipping industry, this filament winding method. Okay, good. So any questions about the different manufacturing processes that we have discussed so far? Again, I repeat, this is not a manufacturing of composites course. This is a mechanics of composites course. So we are looking at the different manufacturing processes from a very superficial high level. But still, if you have any questions, let me know. Yes.
Sir, you said that based on, fiber orientation or like a fiber length, the properties of composite change.
Yes.
So, how much does this like affect the properties? Like, do the properties change drastically, or like very little deviation is there?
Drastically. The answer is drastically. But I mean, then you will ask me if the properties change directly, what? So you will ask me, what if the properties change drastically? Why don't we use long fiber composites at all time? Yes.
Yes.
That is, I mean, indirectly, I think this is your question, correct?
Yes.
Because of cost. So a the raw material for a short fiber composite will be less than 100 rupees per kilo. High modulus carbon fiber is more than 10,000 rupees a kilo.
Okay.
So depending on the application, you will use different type of composite materials. During this course, you will learn how to calculate the properties of composite materials as a function of the fiber length, as a function of the orientation. All this will come under your mechanics of composites.
Okay. And sir, if the fiber length is very low, like you said, 100 rupees per kilo. So, are those properties still better than metals, or like stiffness is lower than metals?
We can make it comparable to aluminum. We'll come to that later, how exactly what the properties are, how to calculate. There is not an easy way of saying, because even if fiber is short, it could be carbon or it could be glass.
Okay.
And carbon is stiffer than glass, we already know that. So it depends. There are, and also I think we need to be very clear right from this is, as soon as you learn about composites, performance is sometimes not the only criteria. Okay, there are other reasons as to why you might want to use a composite material. We'll discuss that. Okay, so Tarun Santosh is asking, what is the function of resin? So resin basically is the thermoset or the thermoplastic. I mean, we use different words, but all of them mean the same thing. So I am putting it in the comment. All of them in the context of composites will mean same thing. Plastic, resin, matrix. All of this, different people will use different terminology, but all of them mean the same thing. And their job is, just by fiber, using a fiber, we cannot make a structure. The function of plastic, resin, matrix, whatever you call it, it is to glue all the fibers together and make a solid structure. Okay, Tarun?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, good. So to further answer Sumit's question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the next two manufacturing methods. No, or and then we'll come back to this in the next class. Let us look at something which is very interesting in the context of what he has asked. So is this slide visible? I'm still sharing my screen, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So this is a plot which is usually made by material scientists to understand which composite should be used by which sector. So imagine that you have an XYZ coordinate axis system where one of the axis is one by cost, one of the axis is performance, one of the axis is rate of production. Okay, so one by cost means higher value of X means it is cheaper. Lower value of X means it is expensive. On the y-axis, I have put performance. Performance means stiffness, strength, all those properties that we have been talking about. And on the z-axis is the rate of production. Okay. Now the aerospace industry wants high performance. It does not care about the cost. It does not care about the rate of production. So if you have a composite material which is somewhere here, aerospace industry will want it. Okay. The automotive industry is on the other end. It is very cost sensitive. It is very much concerned about rate of productions. Most automobile manufacturers would like to make tens of thousands of cars every day. And also the performance is not so important for them. Yeah, if performance is comparable to steel, then we are in business. The mechanical industry is somewhere in between. It is cost sensitive, but not so much. It is performance sensitive, but not as much as the aerospace industry, and so on and so forth. So based on this, if I have a composite material which is very expensive but gives me fantastic properties, the aerospace sector will happily take it. So unidirectional composites are almost exclusively by the aerospace industry because of this reason, because they are not cost sensitive. Okay. And automotive sector will almost never use that because they are very cost sensitive. To understand that, imagine that you went to the Maruti showroom to buy a car, let us say Alto. Currently its cost is 4 lakh rupees. Its mileage is, let's say, 15 liters per kilometer. And in terms of comfort, let us put it at a scale of 1 to 10, it is somewhere at a 5. Now, if Maruti was to make me an offer that instead of 15 kilometers per liter, I can get 17 kilometers per liter, and the comfort instead of a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 will be 8 or 9. But instead of 4 lakhs, if I have to pay 40 lakhs, most likely I am not going to take that offer. Because no matter how much I run that car, from a mileage improvement of 15 to 17 liters per kilometer, it will never justify the 10-fold rise in cost. But in aerospace industry, the mathematics is somewhat different. So these are the choice of composite materials, when to use full long fiber, when to use short fiber. It is very complex. This plot sort of gives you some idea, but there are other factors also. Let us, for example, do you want to make a flat shape or do you want to make a complex shape? Aeroplane wing is flat. And there are some parts inside a car which might be complex shaped. You cannot use the same manufacturing process to make both. So the choice of fiber and matrix will dictate the manufacturing process to be used. You have to decide whether it is thermoplastic or is it thermoset. Thermoplastics have high viscosity, high processing temperature, quick setting time, but lower properties than thermosets. So another important criteria is your fiber reinforcement type. Now, you might, depending on your requirement, you might have to make a flat plate or you have to make a complex shape. Now, depending on the fiber, if my fibers are infinitely long and they are having the same cross section, I cannot make complex shapes out of fibers. So I can only lay them up and make flat plates. On the other hand, if I have very, very short fibers, I can make any complex shape that I want. But short fibers have low stiffness. Short fibers have low stiffness, but they give me high possibilities in terms of the shape design. Unidirectional composites have very high stiffness, but very low design possibilities. I can only make flat or at best curved shapes. Ideally, we would like to have a manufacturing method which is somewhere here. I would like to use continuous fiber and I would also like to make complex shapes, but currently it is not possible. So you have to look at a chart like this and then you decide, do I want, what is the shape that I want? What is the stiffness that I want? And then accordingly, you will decide which type of composite material to use, whether it is short fiber, whether it is random orientation, so on and so forth. Orientation control, higher fiber alignment leads to higher stiffness. Like I was saying, if fibers are aligned in the same direction, stiffness and strength in that direction is higher. Longer processes lead to greater orientation control. Some processes lead to greater orientation control. Inherently, some manufacturing processes like hand layup, you have more control over the orientation processes. Longer the fiber, easier it is to control the orientation. But longer the fiber, harder it is to make a shape which is complex. Okay, so another your consideration could be that what is the reinforcement aspect ratio? Basically, it tells you how long your fiber is. Length by the diameter is your aspect ratio. So what is the aspect ratio of your fiber and what is the orientation control? If it is very small fiber, which length by diameter is of the order of 1 to 100, you cannot control the fiber orientation. On the other hand, if your fiber orientation is tending to infinity, you can control, you have full control over the orientation. In all 3 dimensions, you can control. But then longer the fiber, you cannot make complex shapes. So it's multi-variable optimization problem almost. Another important consideration is your how complex is your shape and how many parts do you want in a year. If you want 1 to 100 parts, you can do hand layup, you can control the complex geometry, you will get very good properties. But on the other hand, if you want like 1,000,000 parts and you want to control the 3D and you also have a 3D geometry, then you have to use injection molding, even though in injection molding, the fibers are going to be small and the stiffness and strength is going to be low. Okay. Smith, does this answer some of the questions that you were asking? Thank you for asking a very good question. Yes? Are the 4 or 5 slides that I just explained clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
This is
Yes.
very interesting. I mean, this is actual
Yes.
true engineering in the right sense of the word, because you have to think about many, many things before deciding what type of composite, which fiber. It is not, I mean, all the time we cannot simply say, okay, I want the best properties. Then you cannot make the shapes that you want, or you cannot produce the number of parts you want. Of course, now with the advent of 3D printing, maybe the game will change forever. For example, my point is, it is possible that with improvements in the 3D printing, we can reach somewhere here. So maybe 3D printing, in this chart, 3D printing could occupy this space, where all my fibers will be aligned in the same direction, but I will also be able to make complex shape that I want. But there are other problems in 3D printing. Yeah? The voids are very high and it is difficult, but yeah, there is hope. Hopefully in the next 10 years, 20 years, 3D printing will mature enough to reach here. But as of today, we have to follow this curved line. If I want complex shapes, I have to compromise on the stiffness. There is no possibility. Okay, good. Any questions, or can I go to the next manufacturing method? Agarwal, Rahul, how do we test the amount of voids that are present in the structure? Do we use the same? You can use the same methods, but you can also use different methods. So some of the things that we usually do, the easiest is to use what is known as ultrasound. You know, in hospitals, we have ultrasound to check whether we have some tumor or something is inside our body. So that could be one way. So the sound reflecting capabilities of a carbon fiber is different from that of a void. So based on that, you can identify. Or you could do a micro CT, that you go inside, you put it inside a micro CT, and then you can see where there are voids, what is the shape of the fiber. Or you could cut apart, put it under the microscope and visualize. There are many, many ways, and some of them are the same as metals. Some of them are not the same as metals because we have carbon fiber and we can exploit the property of carbon fiber to find out whether or not there is a void. It will be interesting for you to know that some of the different techniques that we use in hospitals nowadays, like MRI, micro CT, ultrasound, they were actually developed by material scientists to find out about voids and internal structure. Later it became, and people understood that maybe we can also use it for the medical industry, and then it went from material scientists were able to help the medical industry also. Okay, good. Any more questions? If not, then I am going to my remaining manufacturing methods that I wanted to talk about. Just one or two were left. So we had finished this filament winding, yes, that you take a mandrel and you rotate it using robotics, and then fiber is wrapped around it. After some time, the core is removed and you have this part.
Sir,
Yes. Yes.
sir, I have a question. Sir, we said that making composites using long fiber are actually costly. Does this mean the manufacturing process is costly, or the long fibers itself are very?
Manufacturing of
Okay,
the
sir.
long fibers is costly
Okay, sir.
because higher quality control. I mean, if you allow the fiber to break, that means there are certain things that you don't need to do.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so yeah, but filament winding is using continuous fiber, and it is using continuous glass fiber usually, not carbon. Okay, and you can make complex shapes, especially if your hoop strength is important. Filament winding is very interesting. Another important type of manufacturing is injection molding. Injection molding is something that most of you have studied in the context of plastics, I think, or even metals can be injection molded. So I think most of you know what injection molding is, but let us try to see what happens. So in the context of composite materials, injection molding has two steps. One is extrusion, the other is injection. In extrusion, you have matrix and the fiber. They are extruded and you get pre-compounded pellets like this. So these look like small capsules. They have fiber and matrix inside it. This is injection molded, and you can make very complex shapes like this. So what happens? Let us see. So in the extrusion process, you have resin which is going, and you have fiber which is going. No, you have the glass fiber which is going inside, high temperature and pressure, and resin which is coming through this, and it goes through a die, it goes through a water bed, and then you have pellets like this. Pellets has fiber and matrix which is combined. It is sometimes called pre-compounded pellets. Pre-compounded pellets means the glass fiber has been compounded into the matrix. Okay. So basically inside this, you have the fiber and the matrix is mixed here, and it is pushed along the vacuum and forced to pass through a small nozzle so that you get it in the form of fiber, like a longish filament fiber, which is then chopped into small pieces. Now, inside the screw, fiber breakage is most likely to take place. So the fiber is traveling in a straight line. When it hits the surface of the screw, it is going to buckle, and most fibers are brittle, not ductile. So they bend and they break. This results in the decrease in fiber length and non-uniform distribution of fiber length. All the fibers will not have the same length. And because of decrease in fiber length, the properties are also going to come down, but we have to deal with it. And then you will injection mold it. So injection molding essentially means from this yellow is your pre-compounded pellets that you have put. It is under high temperature and pressure, is pushed to a mold, kept there for some time, and then your part is ready. The pressure is very high. So this animation that you see is the actual time that might be needed to build a part like this. So to build a part like this by injection molding, it will not require more than 2 to 6 seconds. This yellow is showing you the pellets, which has both glass fiber and matrix. And as the glass fiber and as the at high temperature matrix become liquid, as it flows inside the mold, it carries glass fiber with itself. So the fiber orientation is a function of the flow of the matrix. This is a more schematic representation. This is a simulation of what is happening inside a mold, and these numbers that you see here are telling you how many seconds is taken to build a part like this. This is when you have injection molding from 2 points. This is injection molding in 1 point. This making this part required 2.05 seconds. This part is 2.4 seconds. This is a pendant inside a Volkswagen car. There is some sort of crank mechanism which is inside this. Okay, and then there are other modern manufacturing methods like automated tape layup, centrifugal casting, 3D printing, etc., etc. But in every time, the property that we expect, that is 100, there will be some lower in property when you are actually designing. These are known as knockdown parameters. Theoretically, you might calculate the strength to be 100 megapascal, but when you actually design it, you will not design it for 100 megapascal, you will design it for a lower value because there are large number of knockdown factors. Knockdown means it is knocking down the properties. It could be due to time, temperature, environment, or it could also be due to manufacturing, meaning whether there is void or no voids. Did it lead to some warpage? Did the matrix get degraded? You started as fibers all aligned in the same direction. Did it slightly curve or something? All of this leads to some degradation of property. It might not always be 50% as is shown here, but you are going to get some knockdown from the properties that you calculated theoretically to the properties that you have actually, that you should use during design. That you have to be very clear. And most of the time, these knockdown factors in your basic mechanics of design, basic mechanics of composites are not accounted for. We are only able to calculate the relative property. We are not able to calculate what is the knocked down property. That requires more complex mechanics of composites. So if this was a advanced mechanics of composites, then only we would be able to take into account of all these different factors. Not in this course. So this is the summary. I mean, basically you are using composites to save weight, to increase mechanical properties. You want to reduce the number of elements. Sometimes you have unique combination of properties. You can make different shapes, but it has to come at a reduced cost. Okay, so this more or less brings me to the end of how much I wanted to discuss about manufacturing. Any questions? Yes. Anybody? Anything that you did not understand or you want more discussion or anything? Everything is clear? Everybody now at least understands how difficult it is to make a composite? After this lecture, we'll rarely talk about manufacturing of composites, but this is something that you should keep in your mind for the rest of the course while using the formulas, while making the assumptions. You should know whether how accurate or inaccurate your different assumptions are. Sir, why? Okay. What is your name? Nanda or Venki? What should I call you?
Sir, Kishore, sir.
Kishore. Kishore is asking why long fibers are stiffer than short fibers. No, long fibers are not more stiffer than short fibers. Long fiber composites are more stiffer than short fiber composites. The stiffness of a fiber is independent of the geometry, more or less. Long fiber composites are stiffer than short fiber composites because in the direction in which you have long fibers, the load bearing capacity is going to be higher. We will discuss this in great detail 2 to 3 weeks from now. Okay? Anything else? Any other question, comments or insights that you want to share about manufacturing, or how it is it the same as what you already knew, or how it is different? What have you new things you have learned? Anything, any comment, anything you want to say? Is there any one of you who had taken the manufacturing of composites course in the autumn semester? Anybody? So all of you did, none of you took the, is this correct to assume that none of you took the mechanics of composites course, fabrication of composites? Okay. So I'm, okay. So Rahul is asking, do prepregs provide better properties than laying fiber and then pouring resin? Not necessary. So for those of you who don't know, prepreg stands for pre-impregnated fiber. So sometimes you can, I mean, if you want to make composites, you have two options. One option is to buy fiber and the matrix separately and do the manufacturing process. The second possibility is to buy what is known as prepreg. Prepreg is pre-impregnated fiber. In that, you get a roll where the fiber is already impregnated with the matrix. So the fiber is already surrounded by the matrix. You don't need to buy both separately. The advantage of a prepreg is that it makes your manufacturing easier. The disadvantage is that earlier you just have to store the resin in a humidity controlled and conditioned temperature. Now you have to have big rolls. So if you use prepregs, you have to storing it is difficult. But in general, prepregs they increase your convenience. It is easier to make composites out of prepreg than using dry fiber plus matrix because the mixing is already done for you. And the correct matrix is mixed with the correct fiber. I mean, the optimal combination of matrix and fiber is there. On the other hand, this does not allow you to experiment between different combinations of fiber and matrix. Okay, Rahul, does this answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Malik Arjun is asking, is composite material only take tensile load? No, composite materials can take I mean, usually in an aeroplane, they are taking bending load. Now, bending load also leads to tensile load, but not necessary. What you are saying is not necessarily true. It is good in tensile load. It is going to have good properties in the axial direction of the fiber, but it is not necessary that they will be only subjected to tensile load. Iftikhar, what are we fixing in curing process? In the curing process, we are allowing the cross-setting of the monomers. We will start with monomers. We put it over the top of the fiber, or the prepreg has monomer plus fiber. And at high temperature, we are allowing the curing of the matrix so that the thermoset is ready. Curing means basically the cross-linking of the thermoset monomers to create polymers. Okay. Anything else? Iftikhar, Mallikarjun, are your questions answered?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good. Any more questions? If not, then I am winding up this lecture.